Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Rabbi Stephen here. Hope you had a great week. And this week we start off with the portion of Emor. So after 2 weeks of double portions, following 2 weeks of Pesach, reading the Torah, we now are back to one portion, Emor. Emor is say, like Omer, Amor. And it's speak, say. And Hashem is telling Moses to tell Aaron and his sons what to do to stay pure. So these are the priests. And this was, and I keep saying, it was sort of a different type of Judaism. They basically served Hashem by doing a lot of sacrifices. And they taught Torah. They had the Levites in various cities across, the land of it, or they will at this point because they're still in the wilderness. But when they settle Canaan, they will have different cities with Levites, and it doesn't really say outright, but it discusses the fact that adult men need to study Torah. Now, as a sidebar, do the women have to study the Torah? Yes, but not for the sake of studying Torah. They do that so that they know what their duties and obligations are as women. So what are those? Of course, it's, the cooking, the cleaning, but it's more than that too. It's the laws of purity. It's when a woman has her menstrual cycle, there's certain things that she does in terms of purifying herself and being clean, because you do. Women have an open womb, right? Also the men, speaking of purity, this is all about the priests. It's all about the fact that if a priest has a blemish, then they are not to officiate at a sacrificial service. Yes, they can still eat the holy food, the tithes that were collected from the people of Israel, so that they can sustain the priest, because the priest's job is to serve Hashem on behalf of the people of Israel. It doesn't mean that they're the intermediary. They're just doing it so the people of Israel can be carry on with their lives and supporting themselves, either farming or herding cattle or whatever. And it also talks about how if the priests have certain blemishes, certain disfigurations, okay, then again, they cannot officiate. Now, there's a couple of different reasons for that, depending on if you look at the Orthodox or the Conservative. The Orthodox say, well, this is somebody who is not pure because they have a disfigurement. One arm longer than the other, one leg longer than the other. Of course, if you ask any chiropractor, we all have one leg longer, right? But if it's noticeable, certain things like that, certain facial features. But the Conservative is more practical, all right? It says, well, the reason that they didn't want disfigured priests conducting a service is because if you're in the service, if you're just a regular Israelite and you're part of the service, you're not going to be paying attention to the ritual. You're going to be looking at the priest, right? Like, wow, right? So that's one of the reasons. That's why the priest shouldn't or shouldn't be doing that. Now let's talk a little bit about how that relates to modern times, and the answer is it really kind of doesn't. We don't have priests, at least not yet. There are people in Israel that are planning for a comeback of the third temple, and they are making sure that they know who's a Kohen and who isn't, who is a Levite, right? Because when we rebuild the temple, when we have the third temple, we're going to need the priests and to perform the sacrifices, and we're going to need the Levites to minister to them. So a lot of people have said that, well, this is the modern age. Are we still going to do sacrifices? We don't know. At this point, yes, because that's what the Torah says. It gives us a whole program, if you will, of the sacrifices. Now, it's interesting that we say the word program, all right, because the Hebrew year was one big program. Started at the 1st of Nisan, which is the beginning of the secular year in the spring. It was when we left Egypt. And 15 days later is when we have Passover. And the second day of Passover, as we're doing now, is we count the Omer. The Omer was the barley offering. It was the first grain that was harvested of the year. And the grain offering, 1/50th of the field, went to the Levites and the priests, the Levites and the Kohanes. Then we have Shavuot, the countdown of Shavuot. That's when Moses was up with Hashem. He brought down the Ten Commandments and the rest of the Torah. Then we have Tisha B'Av, which is a modern holiday. It was a very solemn time when we mourn the loss of the two temples. Then we come into, in the fall, we come into Rosh Hashanah. 10 days later, we have Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the spiritual year, when we actually change the year. Yom Kippur, again, Day of Atonement. We have 8 days of Sukkot, which is when observes two things. We had the Israelites living in huts while they were out in the wilderness. It's also an acknowledgement of the fall harvest. Then we have Simchat Torah, we have Hanukkah, we have Purim, and then we start with Passover again. So it's a yearly cycle. So what relevance does the priestly rituals and the way they dressed and the particulars have to do with what's going on today? Now, some people might say nothing. But remember that the prayer service that we do today is founded upon and a reflection of the sacrifices, the sacrificial services that the priests did back when the temples, the first and the second, were standing. Right? So that's kind of the relevance. We acknowledge that because we also miss the temple. Now, as I said, this is the time when we're counting the Emor. We count down 49 days from the second day of Pesach to Shavuot, the giving of the Torah. And it is, in modern parlance, as some of the rabbis, as some of the sages have decreed, kind of a period of semi-mourning. You're not supposed to get married. You don't cut your hair, except on Lag BaOmer. That's the 33rd day. Okay. Now, for me personally, okay, I do as few mourning festivals as possible. The idea of mourning during the Omer is that we don't have a temple. So we mourn that. But we've got Israel. Israel is standing on its own. They've set up the Sanhedrin. They are getting ready for the third temple. It is standing and it is thriving. It is contributing a lot of medical advances in scientific and technology to the world. Why do we mourn? There is a service, part of the morning and afternoon service, called Tachanun. And it's putting down the head. It's putting down the head in shame because we don't have his temple. When I daven, I don't do that either. I don't want to mourn. I want to rejoice. That's just who I am. It's just how I see Judaism. And this is rabbinically decreed. So why am I going against the rabbis? Because it's my opinion. It's my feeling. It's my judgment. And as the rabbi of a congregation, I am entitled to make that interpretation. Judaism is not a centralized religion. It is a very decentralized religion. Each rabbi, each rav, is a teacher and an expert in halacha at whatever venue they're at, whether it be at a synagogue, be it Hillel, whatever. Okay, so not that it's a big power trip or a control issue, but it's my responsibility to interpret the laws to the congregation. Now, in that vein, we talked Friday night, last Friday during services. I gave a sermon, and some people, I saw the flux, and somebody even challenged me a little bit on it. Why don't we take out the Torah on a Friday night? Well, why do we want to? Because there's more people there. We typically have a minyan on a Friday night. We had a big crowd celebrating some very, very wonderful couples' anniversaries, and Mazel Tov to the Bachs, to the Englishes. Oh gosh, I shouldn't have said anything. I'm going to forget who was there. The Villanuevas, I think the Riegers too. Okay, so why don't we take the Torah out? The evening service was not always done. In fact, at one point it was an optional service, and the rabbis like, should we do it? Should we not do it? And the reason it was optional is because there was never a sacrifice during the evening. They had a sacrifice in the morning. It was big to do. They prepared the altar. They cleaned it up for the next sacrifice. They made sure the menorah had enough oil in it to light. They made sure the incense and the ashes, cleaned out the fire pit. So they had a big sacrifice. They also had one at dusk. That's the mincha service. Now, the word in Hebrew for afternoon is tzocharayim. The word, it's a Shachrit service in the morning from Shachar, dawn, and yet it's called the Mincha, which means offering, because it was an offering right before dusk. That's why a lot of rabbis will daven the Mincha, the afternoon service. They'll wait about a half an hour before sundown, and then they'll do it. Some people will also daven Mariv right after that, do a Mincha Mariv service, as we do with some bat mitzvah. So we don't take the Torah out Friday night, or any night for that matter, and we don't wear a talit because it's not a big deal. Okay, it's you're getting ready for bed anyway. You're saying the Hashkivenu prayer, which is a sort of a bedtime prayer. So for that reason, it's not as important as the morning service. The morning service is really the key service. That's when we say things like, the priestly blessing. May God shine His countenance on you. What a great way to start the day. Okay, we talk about Hashem, keep me, and this is what some of the rabbis said. Keep me far apart. Remember, Fiddler on the Roof. May God bless the Tsar and keep him far away from us. But we say that, keep us far away from an evil inclination or an evil person. Let my words always speak the truth. These are affirmations that we say as part of the prayer service, and that's why we do it. And that's why the Torah is there. That's why we study Torah in the morning. So, Shabbat Shalom. And on that vein, hope to see you all Saturday morning. We'd love to take out the Torah, have a minyan. We have people that need to say Kaddish, and we typically do that with a minyan. I kind of play with that a little bit, but we really should have a minyan. So again, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you in synagogue this Friday and Saturday.